Ranunculus Pensylvanicus by William Zeranski. 3.5 weeks of continuous rain made it a soggy spring. Out in the broad backyard, the greenery had gotten out of hand. The grass competed with the weeds to see which had the ambition to become more unmanageable first. Joe opened the porch door and walked out into the yard. Each footfall squished in the saturated ground. Water lapped over the toe of his boots. His dog, Waldo, followed right behind, almost tripping him. "Calm down!" Joe paused and reached down to give a brisk rub along the dog's shaggy flank. Morning sun broke through the trees, sending long lashes of light on the glittering ground. Puddles of water stood in scattered patches like lily ponds. That particular mystical scent of green was in the damp air. He took in a deep breath, savored it, and walked further out, taking a circuitous route past the old pump house, an old stone structure just big enough to house a pump that hadn't drawn water in 80 years. He stopped and watched Waldo frolic, leaping and then dropping low to peer back from a crouch and then roll in the boggy grass. Joe smiled, enjoying the canine's antics, and he laughed, knowing he'd have to towel the dog off before admitting his four-legged friend into the house. Waldo leaped up and bolted to a patch of green on the other side of the pump house. Diving in, scattering large beads of water, he snuffled the earth and the mix of tall grass and weeds, causing the long stems of yellow flowers to bend like trees in a high wind. He chomped at the flailing stalks. "Whoa there," Joe said. Waldo froze at the sternness of the call. In a few long strides, Joe stood next to the dog, gave him a pat. "See this?" Waldo watched Joe's hand, not really paying attention to the finger pointing at the yellow flowers, which surmounted the long stems torqued by the dog's gnawing jaws. "See this?" Joe crouched so as not to kneel on the wet ground. "This little yellow flower here?" He pointed as if instructing a child. "This is called Ranunculus Pensylvanicus. Most people call it a buttercup. A pretty yellow flower, isn't it?" Waldo looked at him as if everything he said meant something. "When I was a kid, I was told that if you held the flower under your chin and the petals reflected yellow on your throat, that meant you liked butter. Now, isn't that something?" Joe smiled and reached down to where the stem grew from the earth. "But for all its beauty, the damn thing is poisonous." "That's right. Pretty and deceptive. Something like a lie that sounds good." He scratched the dog behind the ears. "Now, being that this flower is an annual, it comes back every year. But you don't want them coming back, and you just can't cut them down. You got to rip them out of the ground, roots and all." He gave a tug, and out came the stem. "See that?" He pointed at a clot of dirt dangling from the bottom of the stalk. He dropped it and turned to rough up the dog, who then rolled, hopped up, and then scampered away. Waldo charged off to the far side of a neighboring field. Joe returned to the task of tearing out what remained.